I uncovered a haunted ancient text that cursed those who dared to read it. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill seized my spine. It crept up slowly, like fingers grazing my neck. The air thickened, heavy with dread and something else, something ancient, whispering from the shadows. My day had started so normal. I was sifting through dusty boxes at my grandmother's old attic, the sweet smell of musk mixed with wood and thyme. Sunlight pierced through the cracks, casting long, crooked shadows that danced across the floor. Nothing but forgotten toys and knickknacks. Until I found it. The text lay there, bound in cracked leather, its pages tantalizingly yellowed. A shimmer caught my eye. Glyphs. Odd symbols etched in a language I couldn't recognize. Curiosity overrode caution. I held it close. Instantly, a wave of unease washed over me. The room felt colder. The shadows stretched, sliding closer. I could have sworn I heard whispers, taunting me, urging me to read. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dust exploded into the air, and an acrid smell filled my lungs. As I began to decipher the text, the shadows morphed, wraith-like figures shifting just beyond the corner of my eye. Then came the noises. A soft thud from behind. My heart quickened. I spun around, scanning the dim room. Nothing. Just silence. It clawed at my insides, making my chest tight. I turned back to the text, but it felt wrong, like a curse just waiting to leap from the page. Suddenly, the floor creaked loudly underfoot. I jumped. The text slipped from my hands, slapping against the floor like a warning. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, drowning out my thoughts. I grasped my head, cold sweat trickling down my back. I had to know. I reached for it again, but as I did, the shadows intensified, darkening the corners of the attic like a living blanket. I could feel something. A presence. I couldn't shake it. The air vibrated, pregnant with unease. A sudden wind whipped through the attic, slamming the door I had come in through. I wheeled around, breath caught in my throat. The whispers solidified into a cacophony, echoing off the walls. Panic surged. My legs wanted to flee, but something held me in place, and then I saw it. A figure emerged from the darkness, barely visible, a twisted silhouette against the flickering shadows. My heart thundered. I gasped. What was it? The room felt like it was closing in, suffocating me. The figure moved closer, gliding through the air as if defying gravity. My mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. The text lay abandoned. The whispers crescendoed, and the world around me dimmed. What did I unleash? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The whispers waxed and waned, a sinister symphony that echoed in my skull. Each note was a taunt, a chilling reminder of the price of curiosity. The figure before me shimmered like a hologram, its features elusive, always just beyond my grasp. I strained to discern form from shadow, but all I caught was a gleam, a pair of eyes, hollow and dark, swallowing the light whole. Sudden dread unfurled in my gut as realization clawed its way into my mind. This presence was not a mere figment of my imagination, it was a guardian of the text, a being summoned by the ancient ink to protect its secrets. And I was a fool who dared disturb its slumber. The cold in the room intensified, wrapping around me like an iron grip. I staggered back, colliding with a stack of forgotten trunks. Old toys clattered to the floor, their broken laughter turning into a mocking chorus. The attic shrieked with the weight of something trapped, something that had been waiting for too long. I turned to flee, but the air around me thickened, pulling me back as if it had developed a hungry will of its own. Stay. The word emerged from the figure, echoing like death knells against the wooden beams. It resonated through the space, vibrating within my bones. I couldn't breathe, my lungs felt like sealed jars, unable to release the screams they harbored. The shadows danced, a malevolent light show that made my heart race. Against every unnerving instinct, I moved forward, drawn like iron to a magnet, unable to look away from the entity that now hovered before me. Choose, it hissed, the sound rasping from the abyss, curling around my head like smoke. Knowledge or life? Each word fell like a hammer. Terror surged within me, a primal urge to run. But a terrible curiosity clawed at me from the inside, imploring me to understand. I could feel the pages of that cursed text throbbing in my mind, each letter threatening to unravel the very fabric of my reality. Which will you sacrifice? The voice was intoxicating, laced with a liquid promise of forbidden wisdom. Truth comes at a price, are you willing to pay? Frantic thoughts tumbled through my mind like a tempest. Could I risk the knowledge that had ensnared my soul? Each heartbeat echoed the magnitude of the choice before me, a chasm opening wide and deep, revealing the abyss of the unknown. In that moment of indecision, the walls of the attic began to warp. The air thickened, the stench of decay creeping in like a slow poison. Ghostly figures began to emerge from the corners, their forms blurred like smoke, eyes glittering with grief and rage. They were trapped souls invoked by my reckless choice, floating between realms, never to find peace. Suddenly, a haunting scream echoed through the attic, resonating through the very beams above me. It was a cry of anguish, bathing the space in pure despair, reverberating like the toll of a death bell. I was frozen, paralyzed by the vision. The ghastly apparitions were now closer, faces twisted by suffering, mouths opening wide to reveal eternal darkness. They swirled around me, a furious storm of sorrow and rage, and with it all came an intense pressure in my skull, as if the very essence of the text had taken root inside my mind, demanding release. My heart raced as I felt myself slipping into a darker realm, the boundary between my world and theirs fading into obscurity. The walls quaked, trembling beneath the anguish that poured forth from the forsaken souls. Choose. The figure's voice roared, sending shockwaves through the air, vibrating against my skin like the final strike of midnight. And just as I opened my mouth to respond, I felt a violent tug at my spirit, as though something was pulling me into the shadows. The floor beneath my feet splintered, and the darkness surged, clawing upwards. Time stretched and warped, and I was being swallowed whole, for in that moment of dread and choice, I understood the gravity of my mistake. The secrets of the text had not merely awakened something, they had inscribed my very soul onto its pages, binding me inextricably to the horrors it contained. In the final seconds of clarity, as I was dragged towards the void, the last thing I saw was that lone figure smiling, a grotesque rictus of twisted glee as it ascended into a swirling vortex of darkness, taking with it my scream of despair. Then there was nothing, save for a whisper brushing against my ear like a gentle caress, "Now you belong to us," and then darkness enveloped me. The silence that followed was unnerving. I was enveloped in an oppressive blackness that threatened to swallow me whole, but something flickered in the distance, a dim light flickering like a dying star. Instinct kicked in, and I forced my legs to move, stumbling toward that glimmering beacon as if it were salvation. As I approached the light, it morphed and expanded, revealing an unsettling tableau. I found myself standing in a vast library, its shelves overflowing with ancient tomes and scrolls, each emanating a pulse of energy that made the air crackle. Shadows writhed among the spines, their forms shifting with a life of their own, whispering secrets I was both drawn to and repelled by. My heart raced as I darted from one aisle to the next, desperately seeking an escape from this forsaken place. The light twisted and shimmered, pretty yet perilous, illuminating the grotesque faces that emerged from the dark corner, specters, their features contorted in agony and longing. The air grew thick with their sorrow, and with each step, I felt their despair wash over me like a torrential downpour. "Help us," they murmured in unison, their voices overlapping until it became a single, echoing cry, tinged with desperation. I shook my head, instinctually backing away, but behind me against the oppressive void of shadows stood the figure I thought I had escaped. It materialized once more, closer this time, its eyes now ablaze with hunger. "Your journey is just beginning," it crooned, a voice slick with malice. "You were chosen for greatness. The text has awakened your potential, bound you to this labyrinth of knowledge. It knows your desires, your fears know." I gasped, forcing my eyes away from its gleeful visage, focusing instead on the shelves. But the titles of the books were suffocating, their letters stained with an ink that seemed to pulse and writhe like the souls trapped within. Some titles beckoned with alluring promises, while others' ghastly warnings sent shivers crawling down my spine. That a desperate thought flickered in my mind, the text. If I could find it, maybe, just maybe, I could reverse what was happening. Maybe I could reclaim my life from their insatiable clutches. The figure's laughter echoed softly, a dark lullaby that seemed to resonate in my bones. "You think you can escape? You think you can sever the bond? You will not only learn the secrets you seek, you will become a keeper of them." The whisper of the ghosts turned shrill, swirling around me as I darted between the shelves. Some cried for release, others begged to share their knowledge, their stories woven with horror. Ghostly hands emerged from the shadows, grasping at me with desperate fingers. "You will understand," they shrieked, urgency filling the air. My breath quickened, panic tightening my chest. I flung my arm out, smashing into a column of books that tumbled to the floor like dying leaves. It was then that I discovered it, the same cursed text, resplendent yet hideous amongst the chaos. I grabbed it, my fingers brushing over the binding as a tremor of dread shot through me. The air stilled, and I felt the weight of countless souls pressing down on me, each one demanding recognition. Flipping it open, words spilled forth like scalding water, soaking me in their anguish. Shapes coiled from the pages, tendrils of darkness that flickered around me, whispering my name with a sibilant hiss. I struggled to focus through the haze of terror, the whispers amplifying into a cacophony, drowning out every rational thought. Listen, their voices wove together, blending into a singular, resounding truth. And suddenly the room shifted again. Beams of light lit up the tomes, revealing fresh ink that seeped from the spines like blood. They formed phrases I couldn't comprehend, warnings that felt like chains binding me where I stood. I felt dizzy, caught in the surge of the text's power, a siren call beckoning me deeper into its unseen depths. "I can save you," the figure's voice echoed through my mind, smooth and silken. "You only need to trust that I am." My fevered state, I turned back to the text, desperately racing to decipher the incantations, to understand the ancient secrets that had tethered me to this torment. But in my haste, I felt a sudden shift in the shadows, a darkness thicker than before, and then, but only for a fraction of a second, the figure morphed into countless faces of the tortured souls I had seen, their mouths opening in a silent scream. Then, with terrifying certainty, it spoke again, "You cannot escape the curse, for you have chosen the knowledge of those who dwell in the dark." The weight of its proclamation collapsed upon me like a crashing wave, dragging me under just as the whispers intensified into a feverish roar. The text pulsed in my hand, feeding off my fear, and as I looked down at the pages, the ink began to shift again. Instead of letters, I saw my own reflection staring back at me, mouth agape in horror. At that moment, the floor trembled, a deep vibration coursing through me as the library began to crack, splitting open like a gaping wound. I was falling into the churning abyss, the figure's laughter rising above the chaos, mingling with the tortured wails of the damned, forging into a nightmare symphony. The game has only just begun. And then I tumbled into the void, the last vestige of light slipping away as I plummeted into an existence far darker than I had ever imagined. As I descended, the darkness wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, stifling both light and sound. A weightless sensation enveloped my body, and I felt hysteria clutch at my throat, silently screaming into the void. Just a heartbeat before I expected to land, the air shifted once more, and I was abruptly caught, suspended in a state of perverse calm. The shadows that danced before my eyes began to form again, materializing into a long, narrow corridor lined with flickering torches. The light swayed faintly, casting wild shadows that undulated like serpents. I understood, in that chilling silence, that I had entered a different realm, a threshold between realities, thick with despair and histories long forgotten. I tried to find my footing but stumbled as the floor seemed to squirm beneath me. My trembling hands brushed against the cold, damp stones, each one slick with an unknown substance that glimmered ominously in the torchlight. As I stood, the shadows surged forward, calling to me, wrapping me in a gentle yet firm embrace, urging me to flee yet drawing me deeper into the corridor. "Help us!" a soft voice floated through the air, the words laced with sorrow and desperation. They echoed off the walls, intertwining with the flickering firelight to paint a picture of longing, desperation, a yearning for freedom that I could feel in every trembling fiber of my being. That I moved forward, drawn like a moth to the light of flickering, ethereal figures rising up from the ground. Their faces twisted in anguish, they reached out with translucent fingers, their eyes pleading, twinkling with an ancient pain. "The text chose you, the burden is yours to bear," they whispered, the words washing over me like a chilling tide. "Get away from me!" I shouted, only to be answered with a chorus of disappointed sighs echoing around me, filling the corridor with spectral agony. The shadows responded to my fear, flickering with a menacing glee, threatening to consume me whole. Desperation surged within me, pushing me further along this oppressive hall, desperate to find an exit from this waking nightmare. But then, I noticed something at the far end of the corridor. A door, old and weathered, stood slightly ajar, light spilling out onto the floor like a promise. As I approached it, the air thickened with an energy that crackled like static, sending pins of ice slithering down my spine. I hesitated, reality warping around me, the soft murmur of the trapped souls growing louder, urging me to stop, to turn around, to flee before it was too late, yet the door beckoned, radiating an aura that made my heart race. I could almost hear the whispers of the text guiding me, leading me, promising revelation if only I dared to enter. With a quickening pulse, I pushed it open, the hinges creaking in protest. The light inside was blinding, overwhelming, radiating warmth as I stepped over the threshold. But the moment I did, a chilling realization hit me. Was no longer in control. The worlds reversed, and the door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate in a cage of shimmering brilliance that quickly morphed into suffocating darkness. That I, in this dreadful silence, I was not alone. Lurking just beyond the illumination were figures that writhed against the edges of my vision, their twisted forms wrangling each other, trying to push past the radiant light. I could hear their whispers coalescing into horrendous shapes, words I couldn't grasp until one grim phrase broke through, clear and chilling, "Welcome home." With that, the light flickered, and I felt icy fingers gripping my ankles, dragging me back into the shadows. My stomach churned as I clawed at the floor, desperation igniting my every nerve. I glanced over my shoulder, and what I saw sent terror crashing through my system. The tormented faces of Hundredsnow, thousands of souls clamored at the periphery of my sight, their mouths moving in unison, chanting an agonizing mantra that filled the space with dread. "Join us. Join us." As I fought against the tide, I lost my footing and fell backward, crashing against something solid yet ephemeral. It was a wall made of despair, of lifetimes lost in agony, and it shifted under my touch. Suddenly it all began to collapse around. Mules breathed and shadows whispered secrets older than time itself. The last thing I caught before the world imploded into darkness was the figure looming in the background, his sinister grin etched into my memory like fire. Merging with the darkness, he held the cursed text in one hand, its pages fluttering madly. "Only those who dare to seek can know true fear, and the price of knowledge is steep." In that instant, the weight of his words pulled me under, my scream swallowed by the all-consuming void, countless souls reaching for me, their hands grasping for solidity, love, freedom, but only finding the void's caress. Before consciousness slipped away like grains of sand, a glimmer of hope ignited within me. Perhaps the text still held answers buried beneath its cursed surface. But would I survive long enough to uncover them? The shadows laughed as a chilling thought gripped my heart. What if the knowledge I sought was not meant to be found? As the darkness engulfed me, an unholy symphony of whispers began to swell in my ears, each voice clamoring to be heard over the cacophony of shadows. I felt my spirit fracturing, splintering into pieces like glass striking the floor. Just as consciousness threatened to slip from my grasp, a flicker of muted light bled into my awareness, igniting fragments of memory buried within the abyss. That I was back in the corridor, but it was not the same. The walls bled a viscous substance that shimmered like the stars, each droplet pulsating with a heart of its own. I willed myself to rise, drawn once more to the flickering torches that swayed as though in anguish. With each uneven step, more figures emerged from the shadows, their wraith-like forms eternally trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. Their elongated faces twisted with yearning, and their eyes glowed with a spectral fire that paralyzed my breath. "Please help us," one of them rasped, its voice like rusted metal dragging across stone. It reached out with a skeletal hand, the chill of its presence echoing the dread that gnawed at my insides. I recoiled, but the threat of the unknown loomed ever closer. A haunting realization washed over me. His corridor was not merely a passage, it was a prison, a mausoleum for souls who had sought knowledge beyond their mortal comprehension. "Turn back." Another entity cried, the urgency in its tone electric. It was a warning buried in a wave of anguish, but the allure of the ancient text pulled at my heart like an insidious thread, weaving a connection I both loathed and craved. The flickering light cast grotesque shadows on the walls, contorting into unrecognizable shapes, and the words I'd once longed to decipher echoed ominously in my mind. Memories of reading the cursed text surged with insatiable hunger. I recalled its cryptic warnings, its insidious tales of those who had sought power only to find eternal torment. Each page seemed alive, mysterious words smoldering with promised knowledge, and yet I ached to understand what I had unearthed. I felt their tether strangling me as I stumbled forward, drawn into the maw of darkness with no way to retreat. Suddenly, the air shifted, the pressure around me thickening as a low growl emerged from somewhere deep within the corridor. The spectral figures turned from me, their attention drawn to whatever loomed in the depths. I dared to look back, half expecting to see the sinister figure from before, but instead, darkness coalesced into a vast, writhing mass, a formless entity that pulsed with malevolence. Churning like disturbed water, it filled the space with a suffocating hunger that threatened to consume all light. "Offer yourself, become part of us." The chorus of souls chimed together, their haunting harmony weaving in and out of the growl, intertwining with primal dread. I staggered backward, heart pounding wildly against my ribcage, but each step drew me closer to the inky malevolence that pushed against my soul. It was hungry, relentless, and alive. In the shadowed depths, I could make out pairs of glowing eyes, countless souls mesmerized by the void, trapped in a cycle of despair. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized the truth. I was not merely a visitor in their realm, I was a potential vessel, a pawn in an eternal game. No. I screamed, clenching my fists, desperate to resist the pull of that unspeakable darkness. The air crackled with energy, and as I struggled against the force that grasped at my very essence, a piercing light broke through the shadows, revealing a staircase ascending into the unknown. Before my mind could comprehend the decision that danced at the tip of my consciousness, my body propelled itself toward the spectral light, regardless of the horrors I left behind. Higher I went, each step resonating with the whispers of the damned while I clawed toward salvation, but as I reached the threshold of the light, the growling morphed into a tortured shriek, a cacophony of rage that reverberated through the space. Gnarled hands reached from the shadows, grasping at my clothes, my skin, and the light flickered as if sensing their anger. Just as I prepared to burst through the luminous veil, a feeling of trepidation flooded me that I turned briefly to glance back, and my heart froze. Emerging from the swirling darkness was the twisted figure I had glimpsed earlier. He grinned with malevolent delight, and at his feet, legions of the damned surged, faces contorted with despair, their cries echoing in a harmonized wail. They all reached for me, a mourning of agony, a pleading for release that pierced my very soul. "Stay with us," they cried as the light dimmed dangerously low, threatening to extinguish completely. "Join us forever." With my heart racing and a primal instinct screaming at me to flee, I made a final push toward the staircase. The darkness writhed like a beast awakening, angry that I would dare escape, that I would dare to find freedom among the shackled. Just as I thought I could leap through the last beam of light, a deafening roar erupted, shattering the air and twisting the fabric of reality once more. In that moment, the last thing I saw were the faces of the suffering crying out for my decision, followed by the fiendish laughter of the wraith-like master of the abyss, a cruel reminder that whatever choice I made, there would be a price unimaginable. And then the light vanished. The overwhelming weight of darkness crashed down around me, sealing whatever light had briefly illuminated the corridor. Panic seized my chest as the air grew thick with sorrowful whispers, clawing at my sanity. I was enveloped in a void where sound ceased to exist, leaving only the frantic beat of my heart thrumming against my ribs. The terror of being alone in a world outside comprehension constricted my throat. Then, like a shadow peeling away from the wall, a figure coalesced before me. It was the twisted figure, its face a grotesque tapestry of human anguish and malice. The smile, stretched across its gaunt features, revealed teeth that glimmered like sharpened shards of glass. "You escaped," it hissed, its voice a dissonant melody that echoed within me. "But this is merely the beginning, my little scholar." With a wicked flourish, it gestured towards the encroaching shadows, and they responded swelling, morphing into a sea of despairing faces. Each expression screamed of a story untold, bound by the same cursed text that had lured me into this nightmare. "You will learn that knowledge is not without sacrifice," it continued, delighting in my visible horror. A frigid breeze whispered past me, carrying the suffocating scent of decay. In an instinctive reaction, I stumbled backward, only to be met by the chilling sensation of something cold wrapping around my ankles. I glanced down and recoiled in terror. Tendrils of darkness writhed like serpents, slithering up my legs, constricting with an unyielding grip. They tugged at me, pulling me toward the figure who stood with a mocking confidence, reveling in my plight. "Full of ambition you are, my sweet," it crooned, and with every word, the voices of the damned rose in a sinister crescendo, their cries mingling into a single haunting echo. "But ambition has its price, and you must pay it here and now." Desperation clawed at my gut as I thrashed against the tendrils, fighting to shake them off, but they tightened their hold, dragging me closer to the spectre. "No!" I screamed, my voice a whisper drowned beneath their unending sorrow, but my struggle only seemed to amuse the wraith. "Join them," it beckoned, gesturing toward the writhing mass of souls now fully emerging from the abyss, their ghostly forms hovering just beyond my reach. "They've waited for someone like you. They wished to learn, just as you do. They only wished for a taste of the forbidden, and now they exist only to watch you become one of them. Knowledge demands tribute, darling." The truth of its words slithered through my mind, twisting like a dagger as I remembered the warnings buried within the text. To delve deeper was to invite eternal suffering, and here I was, inches from becoming a part of that torment. But it wasn't merely my soul that hung in the balance. I could sense the weight heavy on my heart, as if my very essence was being drawn away, siphoned by the hungry void, yet beneath the rush of fear surged an insidious curiosity, itching at the back of my mind like a fevered whisper. If I joined them, could I truly comprehend the secrets of the text? Or was there a way to outsmart the darkness, to come away with power instead of damnation? What will you choose? The figure's eyes glimmered with malicious glee, its elongated fingers twitching as if anticipating my reply. Embrace the unending truth or perish. That I in that moment, the walls of the corridor pulsated like a beating heart, and as if the darkness held a will of its own, the grim faces turned to me in unison, their empty eyes beseeching. "We can offer you what they cannot, the knowledge you seek. Surrender, and you will witness what lies beyond the veil of existence." The tendrils tightened, and through the cacophony of pained souls, a profound silence settled over me, urging me to think. My life had been touched by shadows long before this moment, predatory forces lurking at the edges of my consciousness, singing promises of power and greatness. But the cost, what would I have to surrender to gain that which I could not yet fathom? Just as the words began to form on my lips, a deafening silence overtook the room. A sudden, violent tremor shook the very bones of the corridor, and the shadows contorted, warping the souls into grotesque caricatures of their former selves. The very air crackled with raw energy, and the darkness roared in fury, as if the abyss itself had sensed my hesitation. Before I could fully comprehend the rapidly shifting reality around me, a blinding flash of light erupted in the distance, cutting through the veil of despair. Ethereal tendrils recoiled, freeing me momentarily from their grip as the figure's face twisted in rage. "No! You cannot escape this fate!" It howled, but the light surged forward, devouring shadows as it approached. I had mere seconds to decide, flee to the light or succumb to the abyss. The tendrils wavered, and in that instant, clarity flashed through the chaos. But just as I turned to escape, the very ground beneath me cracked wide open, revealing a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth more horrifying than any abyss I had seen. I was about to plunge into darkness, caught between two worlds, with the void ready to claim me. Then, as the figure's furious laughter echoed around me, its voice dipped into a sinister whisper, "You will not be able to resist forever. Our bond is forged, and the price will be paid in blood." With a surge of instinct, I lunged toward the blinding light, my heart pounding in rhythm with the impending chaos. The laughter grew fainter as I tore my gaze from the churning darkmaw, but I could still feel the weight of its presentia festering wound in both the fabric of this corridor and my very soul. I sprinted, the shadows retreating like startled vipers, but the light itself twisted, wavering between friendly illumination and menacing glare. It chased me, enticing me further into its grasp even as I struggled with the visceral urge to look back to glance once more at the figure, to understand how deep my fatal connection ran, but with each frantic step, I felt the air shift again, the harmony of whispers morphing into screams that clawed at my senses. "You'll regret this," the figure bellowed, the fury apparent in its voice as I raced toward an uncertain salvation. "You can run now, but the moment you tread upon forbidden ground, you will pay the price." The light expanded, engulfing me in a cocoon of warmth. I reached out, hands stretching forward as if I could grasp at hope itself. But before I could completely escape the pressing shadows, a last tendril snaked its way around my wrist, dragging me back, its icy grip sending chills down my spine. "You will return," it hissed, and suddenly I felt the air shift between agony and clarity, the world around me blurred, the light dimming as the echo of the figure's laughter rattled my bones. I was thrust through a barrier, an unseen threshold that snapped shut with an ominous finality. The dissonance of the corridor's whispers fell away, replaced by the sterile silence of a dimly lit library. Panting, I stumbled into the sanctuary of knowledge. Every surface was teetering under the weight of forgotten tomes and scrolls, their spines cracked and aged. I had escaped, but a shadow still clung to me, shivering at the edges of my consciousness, whispering promises of enlightenment that felt like shackles. "Just one more read," a voice beckoned from the darkness hiding within the room's corners, pulling me deeper into temptation. Only a taste. With trembling hands, I reached for the nearest book, its cover worn and soft beneath my fingers. The title was illegible, but a haunting familiarity pricked at the edges of my mind, like déjà vu revolving between the lives of the damned. As I cracked it open, the musty scent of ancient pages filled my lungs, and the whispers rose again, swirling into a silken chant. "Foolish child," it hissed, "you cannot outrun your destiny. You cannot outrun me." The words danced upon the edges of clarity, enveloping my thoughts until they fractured, the thrill of knowledge mixing violently with dread. Suddenly a chilling gust sucked the air from my lungs, extinguishing the flicker of the overhead lights, leaving me surrounded by oppressive darkness. Shadows loomed larger, reaching for me, every sinister face morphing into the twisted visage of the specter I had fled. Unable to see, I felt my way through the rows of bookshelves, every step echoing a ghost of footsteps from within. Metal clanked softly behind me like chains being dragged across the floor. I trembled, feeling the chilling breath of a presence directly behind me, urging me to turn and confront the horror, to look upon what I feared most. A soft voice flitted against my ear. "Join us," it whispered, somehow different, softer, a plea masked beneath an ominous overlay. "We were like you once. We desired knowledge. And now we exist as whispers in the night of fragmented consciousness yearning for a vessel." Before I could act, the shadows erupted around me, enveloping the room in an impenetrable cloak of night. I stumbled as panic erupted in my chest, my pulse racing in crescendo with their wails. "I will not succumb," I shouted, but words fell hollow against the cacophony, and I felt the whispers sinking into my mind, curling like smoke that choked the air, thriving within my desperation. Then, a single spark ignited from deep within the darkness, a flash illuminating the devouring void momentarily before plunging me back into chaos. In that flickering light, I caught sight of something dreadful, my own reflection, warped and grotesque, trapped fleetingly within a mirror I had not noticed, peering back at me. It grinned with malevolence, a mockery of my courage. "Is this what you desire?" The figure's voice slithered through my thoughts, a taunting echo blending with the cries of the lost. You wish to understand the price of power. The shadows recoiled slightly, parting like a curtain, revealing a twisted doorway at the far end of the library, lighter now, beckoning, but filled with flickering darkness that churned hungrily at the edges. I felt an inexplicable pull, a temptation as strong as gravity, commanding me to take the leap, but as I took a hesitant step forward, a guttural roar erupted from the gaping maw, from the door that throbbed with anticipation. It trembled, shaking the very foundations of the library, and before my eyes, shadows coalesced into grotesque figures, an army of the damned, all thirsting for the same forbidden fruit I did, and then, out of the darkness, one figure stepped forward, its face obscured by a tattered hood, a claw-like hand extending toward me. The cycle begins again, it whispered, each word crumbling like ash. Come to us, scholar, embrace the darkness, for the horrors have only just begun. Caught between desire and dread, surrounded by souls unwilling to let me go, I stood at the precipice, the weight of choice looming heavily around me. And in that electrified moment, the library walls began to tremble, and I realized with dread that my decision was about to unearth a truth I could neither comprehend nor escape. And then, as if mocking my understanding, the shadows surged forward, clamoring to consume me whole. The ground shook as another unseen force erupted from beneath me, and with a blinding flash, my vision exploded into darkness, leaving only the echo of those chilling words lingering in the air. You will pay, are you ready to join us? A piercing silence shattered the gloom as I regained my bearings, though every pulse of blood in my veins suggested I had not entirely returned to myself. I was neither wholly here nor amorphously within the grip of those souls who had whispered sweet, poisonous promises. Darkness lingered, licking at my frozen limbs, the horrors locked onto me like a lingering scent of decay. The library's architecture had transformed. The once living library with its damp pages and creaking shelves now morphed into a labyrinthine grotesquerie, like it was heaving in unison with the fluttering phantoms. My senses heightened as I staggered through the morass of shelves, the dim glow hinting at inscriptions scrawled with an ink as dark as blood. Without warning, a chill swept through me as the voices returned, chaotic whisperings twining through my thoughts, becoming a cacophony of eerie urgencies. Read, learn, unleash, join, they beckoned, converting knowledge into seduction, a perverse thrill tantalizing the fringes of my mind. I pressed my hands hard against my ears, willing the sound to dissipate, yet it only grew louder, thrumming in tandem with my racing heart. Suddenly, a book tumbled from its resting place, landing with a heavy thud at my feet. I halted, my breath momentarily ceasing as I stared down at its cracked leather cover, the faded title now clear, a name I recognized too well from the grim warning scrawled in margins of other texts, composed of paranoia and shadows, the ethers of Atron. A surge of nausea twisted in my gut as I reluctantly knelt and reached for it, an unbreakable urge compelling me to discover its secrets. Despite knowing what dwelled within its pages, with a trembling hand, I lifted the tome and flicked it open. The hinges creaking in protest as shadowy etchings danced across the parched pages. Dark illustrations depicted an ancient ritual, one that bore striking similarities to what I had glimpsed before. Each image seemed to jump from the page, alive with whispers, hymns of suffering sung by the damned, entwined with the allure of mysterious powers. Then, as I read, I felt a cold breath on my neck, dampening my skin, making the hairs stand on end. Join us, the voice cooed again from behind me, though now it bore an almost maternal warmth, disarming in its gentleness. We long for freedom. You too can transcend this wretched existence. But then, as I caught sight of my reflection again, this time distorted within the creased leather of the tome, my heart sank as a harrowing realization gripped me. I saw not just the remnants of fear but something alien lurking beneath the surface, a flicker of longing and a desperate need to belong to the overwhelming darkness surrounding me. That I slammed the book shut, gasping, and turned, ready to confront the palpable presence at my back. But where I had expected to see the cloaked figure, shadows danced without a form, writhing like smoke in the oppressive air. The darkness pulsed in rhythm with my rapid heartbeat, enveloping me more tightly, wrapping tendrils around my wrists and ankles as if desperate to pull me deeper inside itself. Suddenly, a frantic shuffling echoed from the depths of the library, and a low growl resonated through the hall, an unearthly cadence joined by the scraping of nails against something hard, like vulnerable flesh against sharpened stone. I felt my skin crawl as echoes of torment reverberated through the library, dragging me back to memories of what I had tried to escape. Then, from the other end of the chamber, a figure emerged from the haze, one cloaked in spectral gloom, its features obscured but a single, crimson eye pulsed brilliantly from within. It beamed with unwelcome recognition, a repetition of something I was both wary of and drawn to, as if it were beckoning me home. No. I cried, but the voice that escaped my lips was a distant echo, as if drifting from a severed connection to my true self. My breath quickened, a dangerous crescendo building as the shadows began swirling, drawing the figure towards me, joining in the wails of long-gone specters. My heart screamed with desperate understanding. The tether we all shared was a price so steep, my existence felt disturbingly fragile. The crimson eye glinted with sadistic delight, and it spoke without words, its intent spreading through me like poison, paralyzing my will. Time to choose, the figure whispered, voice echoing through the silence, though the shadows entangled me, cutting off escape. Lift the veil or be consumed, accept your fate or fight and perish. That I was wedged between darkness and unsurmountable dread, the watchful eye a veritable beacon amid the chaos. Choices. Consequences. I felt the shimmer of the tome, yet again the knowledge coiling within like a serpent waiting to strike. Then came a blinding flash, and the room shifted once more, the shadows swirling into a tempest. Every spine in the library quivered, turbulent with arcane energy, surging out into a swell of darkness, enveloping everything in its maw, leaving me dangling at the edge of oblivion, and just as a whisper escaped my throat, an invocation of trepidation about the eternal, dark path ahead, the floor beneath me splintered and cracked. Gravity faltered, and in an agonizing moment of surrender, I found myself plummeting, the shadows stretching out to embrace me before I was swallowed whole, the last vestiges of light snapping shut behind me. In that suffocating void, all I could hear were the voices ringing in my ears like a warning bell, you will pay. You are ours. As I fell through the darkness, time lost meaning, and the air thickened to a weight that pressed against my chest, constricting my breath. The cacophony of whispers grew louder, swirling around me like the winds of a never-ending storm, and every syllable felt like a jagged edge slicing through the fabric of my sanity. Then, abruptly, I landed hard, on a surface that felt eerily soft, yet pulsated with a life of its own. I coughed and choked, hastily scrambling to my feet, instinctively grasping at whatever darkness surrounded me. The realm I had fallen into bore no resemblance to the library. I was in a morbid cellar, walls coated with a thick sheen of slime, and the air was thick with the fetid scent of decay, a visceral reminder that I was far from safe. My heartbeat echoed in this confined space, each thud amplifying the dread building within. I reached for light, desperation guiding my fingers along the slick walls, grazing against the contours of something alive, something cold and smooth. In an instant, I recoiled, my mind conjuring images of grotesque creatures lurking just beyond my vision. Join us, hissed a voice from the shadows, sweet yet corrupted, an invitation laced with venom. It sounded like the voice of the figure with the crimson eye, a puppet master pulling at the strings of my consciousness. You've been chosen. You've taken the first step, now don't shy from the leap. A sickening ripple coursed through me, dragging forth fragments of my own nightmares, the faces of those I had loved twisting in agony, their eyes wide with horror as they reached out, their fingers melting into shadows. My throat tightened, a sob clawing to escape as panic gripped me. They were gone because of me. They were lost. In a furtive attempt to escape the weight of memory, I groped through the darkness, my fingers brushing against more surfaces, brittle, slithering, thrumming flesh. My stomach churned as I gasped in realization. I was surrounded by twisted forms, faces contorted in eternal anguish, screaming silently. Souls trapped within this realm, forever damned. No. I screamed, but my voice barely rose above a whisper of despair, swallowed by the depth of the cellar. I could feel the tendrils of their anguish wrapping around me, threading through my being. Your pain is our joy, a chorus of voices replied, soft and mocking, filtering through the shadows as they began to draw nearer. So much potential then, as if summoned by my very thought, the ground shifted again, shifting shapes rising around me, taking form in the stifling darkness. I searched frantically, and before me manifested grotesque versions of those I had lost, familiar yet wrong, their features distorted and marked by the darkness they had succumbed to. Help us, they pleaded, their eyes shimmering with a haunted glow that pierced my heart. You were meant to save us, but my body turned against my will. Each step backward disobeyed, an insidious force dragged me closer to them, and with it came the realization that whatever bound them had its fangs in my soul, thirsting for the moment of despair that would drive me further into the shadows. Another voice broke through a guttural growl that hinted at something even more menacing. "You belong here, where the lost never leave." A monstrous silhouette emerged from the growing shadows, shifting with a malicious grace. Its eyes glowed with a hunger that made me tremble where I stood, then everything erupted into chaos. The walls twisted and contorted, while the cries of the tortured grew into a frantic symphony, punctuated by the deep growls of the creature advancing toward me. I was caught between the agony of the damned and the monster itching closer, each step echoing like a heartbeat set on destruction. In a moment of clarity, I forced my shaking hand into my pocket where the tome was still buried, the dark ink that promised power now a heavy curse. But maybe, just maybe, there was a spell within that could unlock their chains, redeem them. I wouldn't surrender. I wouldn't abandon them, no matter the cost. But as I gripped the book tighter, sound enveloped me, a horrendous laughter that clawed at my mind, growing in intensity as shadows rushed in to claim me. "You think you can save them?" Before I could utter a protest, the creature lunged, its mouth widening impossibly, revealing impossibly sharp teeth glistening with remnants of unspeakable horrors. The darkness surged violently to claim me, a tidal wave crashing through every part of my being, shrieking at me in warning. In that instant, I felt a fragment of strength from the tome flare to life, a whisper of power properly aligned coursing through my veins, just as the creature's maw engulfed me, sealing my fate in a suffocating embrace. And then, with a last gasp of defiance, I read the first incantation that flared to mind, hoping for deliverance amidst the chaos, knowing full well that my choice would change everything. The words rolled off my tongue like poison, the ancient incantation flooding the dismal cellar with a surge of energy, and suddenly, the atmosphere shifted around me. The shadows recoiled, wailing in rage, but I could feel my voice harmonizing with the raw power of the cursed tome. The grotesque figures around me shifted, their anguished faces flickering like candle flames in a tempest. "Bound by the pain we bear, shatter the chains that hold us here," I cried, the refrain pushing me deeper into the incantation, my heart pounding like war drums against the impending doom. Electricity coursed through my veins, the forces surrounding me screaming as I struggled against the darkness that threatened to unmake my very being. I felt the weight of my ancestors press against me, forging a bond one could barely comprehend. Their suffering, their hopes, they had become part of this curse, just like me. The creature paused mid-lunge, a look of confusion conquering the primal hunger glimmering in its eyes. For a brief moment, I dared to believe victory was within reach. The wails amplified, a chaos of despair erupting from those trapped along with me. It echoed my own fears. "You cannot hold them," I commanded the shadows, yearning for the power to fracture the binding ties that tied not just the souls around me but the very fabric of this realm. Yet, with every syllable that passed my lips, I felt a pricking coldness at the back of my mind. It slithered like a serpent, burrowing deeper, a realization that clawed at my sanity. I was not merely setting them free, I was binding myself to the knowledge of their anguish. I wasn't the savior, I was becoming their prison warden. The moment the spell reached its fever pitch, the feral creature lunged, breaking the spell's spellbinding resonance. Its teeth grazed my shoulder, sharp as betrayal, and I bellowed in agony. A pain like no other split my senses, and I tasted iron on my lips. The shadows erupted in a frenzy of sorrow and rage, howling like beasts in a relentless storm, spiraling into chaotic formations, the figures leveraging the moment to shriek as they shifted amidst the maelstrom. In that split second of contact, a strange resonance rippled through me, a haunting transformation as visions of all who had suffered overwhelmed my senses. Each image, their faces waxen, mournful, a testament to their failed aspirations, struck me to the core. A flood of memories blasted through, the echoes of their silencia, silent judgment felling upon me. "Become one with us," the creature hissed, and it clawed at my mind, its voice laced with shadows thriving on despair. "You cannot fight fate. You have awakened them, and now they want what you promised." I roared, gripping the cursed tome tighter, yet it was without teeth. The power of the tome burned cold against my palm, a taunting reminder that knowledge exacts a toll. My breaths quickened, the once vibrant words colliding in a crescendo of pain. "No!" I screamed, Forcing my eyes shut against the encroaching shadows, I fought against surrender for the sake of the lost souls that hungered at my feet, watching me plead for their pale salvation. Then, silence enveloped me, a stillness so profound that my heartbeat echoed like doom in the void. I opened my eyes, seeing now the creature reflected there, my own flickering visage superimposed over its ghastly features, a mirror to my ambitions turned grotesque. I was the monster as much as it was. The anguish of the souls rose again, gathered in an immense vortex of possibilities, their sorrow feeding the shadows that crowded me, beckoning me to sway, embrace it. They screamed, a wave crashing over me, urging me to merge with their eternal lament. You are ours. You wanted power, now take it. Temptation and dread warred in my chest until they fused into a single force. With jagged resolve, I channeled my fear, refusing to let them drown me in despair. You will not take me. I howled, and as the shadows whipped around me, I flared an inner truth: if my life held sway over the darkness, so it must too be resolved through the light of their pain. Perhaps I'd be the keeper of their chaos. The darkness recoiled, shimmering like ink splashed across water, and in a moment of clarity, I expanded my vision beyond my own torment. If I am to hold your sorrows, then I demand your truths. I shouted, the incantation wrapping around me, illuminating every crevice of despair, and for every tear lost, there rose a sense of empowerment, a thrilling electricity. Suddenly, the figures around me erupted into motion, screaming with clarity and anguish, as their forms dissipated, merging with the essence of the darkness cocooning me. Then something inexplicable unbound itself, and I felt knowledge swell inside, consuming me, turning my very core inside out, and I understood. I wasn't just a bearer or keeper of their pain, I had become its conduit, the nexus through which power spilled forth. Exhilarated yet aghast, I staggered into the void, realizing every bit of knowledge that I obtained came at an unthinkable price, and the words I read from the cursed text shifted before me, revealing vengeful patterns, scales of sacrifices foreseen. I stood at the precipice of an insufferable truth. Knowledge was as potent as it was cruel, and it gnawed incessantly at the boundaries of my sanity. I could not escape this darkness, nor could I cage it within mere words. It was entwined with my existence now. With that horrifying realization, a lingering chuckle surged through the shadows, echoing like shattered glass as I turned, confronting not just the fog but my own haunted visage, trapped forever in the cherished curse of forbidden knowledge. Shadows began to ripple, boiling within chaotic vibrance. I had unleashed something far worse than I had ever imagined. And I understood with every fragment of my tattered soul the price was not just knowledge, it was enslavement, a dreadful symbiosis captured through an eternal cycle. My scream escaped, but it was swallowed in the laughter of shadows, not completely alive or dead, merely existing as an echo witnessing its own demise, and in the final echo of my own voice, one thing rang clear above the chaos: now you've become what you sought to escape forever. Within that chilling final revelation, an undeniable truth lingered in the depths of my shattered consciousness, forever cutting into the marrow of my being. Now, I was one of them, the keeper of the cursed text and an eternal architect of despair.